our fourth story out front, one of the biggest threats to this country. And it's much closer than a lot of people think. You know, you think of, well, the Middle East somewhere, or you think of China, but no, it's Mexico. And investigators are trying today to identify 49 bodies that were found mutilated beyond belief and recognition, stuffed in plastic bags in the small town of San Juan yesterday. That's less than 100 miles from the American border. The bodies of 43 men and 6 women were found headless with no feet and no hands. They are victims of Mexico's Los Zetas drug cartel. More than 47,000 people, 47,000 people. Just think about that for a minute, have been killed in Mexico since President Felipe Calderón launched an offensive against drug cartels in 2006. 99 have been killed in brutal fashion like what I just described in just the past month, as the 2 biggest cartels, Los Zetas and Sinaloa, fight for control of Mexico's border with the United States. Why do they fight for control of that border? Because the drug wars are continuing. 90% of the cocaine that enters the American country, and it comes through Mexico, it's also the main supplier of marijuana and meth in this country. So the question is, what else is getting into the United States that we don't know about? Jay Uhern is the former head of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and now principal at the Chertoff Group. Hippolito Acosta is a former undercover INS agent and the author of The Shadow Catcher. And appreciate both of you taking the time. Jay, first of all, let me just ask you, it seems like the violence is getting much, much worse. And what I just described with the heads and the feet cut off, and this is brutality at a level that I think is very, very hard to imagine, but appears to be at this point, dare I say, common?
Yeah, I think when you actually take a look, Aaron, the numbers actually may be closer to 50,000 since December of 2006 when President Calderón really started to take the fight to the cartels. We've seen it start to level a little bit in the last few months. Leveling, I think, is really a statement of choice here, that about 1,000 killings per month. But the gravity and just the heinousness of the killings this past few days really shows as far as how aggressive and how ruthless these individuals are. Beyond just as far as the beheadings, the cutting off the arms, the legs, sends a strong signal.
It certainly does. Polly, how I mean, is this really all about controlling who's controlling the drugs going into the United States? I mean, this is still a question of U.S. demand and supply that is not necessarily from Mexico, but transiting through Mexico?
Yes to both of your questions. First off,
Polly, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
what you have. I'm sorry. What you have are two cartels that are actually fighting for a very lucrative route, and I think this violence is going to continue. You know, Jay was talking about sending a signal, and I think it sends a strong signal to anybody who would oppose the cartels in that particular area. And I think the violence is going to continue during the next few months. We have a presidential election coming up in Mexico, and I think some of the cartels are positioning themselves to make sure they control those particular areas, you know, for a number of reasons.
And let me ask you, Jay, about something else. I mean, I don't know if everyone remembers, but obviously there was a plot that the United States government alleges was put forth by the Iranian government using an Iranian American in Texas who was hiring a Mexican drug cartel to commit an assassination that would have killed civilians right here in Washington, D.C. We also, of course, heard from Air Force General Douglas Frazier, who testified on whether there was other terrorist activities going on in Mexico to get into the United States. And here's what he said.
Those organizations are primarily focused on financial support to organizations back in the Middle East, but they are involved in illicit activity. And so that is the connection that we continue to look for as we watch in the future, that connection between the illicit activity and the potential pathway into the United States.
Jay, how big of a risk is this, that Hezbollah or other terrorist activities could be working with drug cartels to get into the United States?
Well, I think one of the things that's important to recognize, these are criminal organizations, and they certainly will diversify what the level of criminality is, whether it be drugs today, weapons or a currency tomorrow, or if there's a need to move high-value targets across the border in the United States. And certainly that was a great piece of work by the federal agencies and DEA specifically, was they were doing drug investigations, actually uncovered the individual who was contemplating an assassination attempt. But clearly these are criminals, and they're going to do anything they can for a profit going forward.
Mm-hmm. Polly, one thing that I find hard to understand here, especially with all the coverage in this country and the whole Fast and Furious controversy, there are 6,600 licensed gun dealers in the United States within 100 miles of the Mexican border. 70% of the guns recovered from Mexican drug activity had originated here in the United States. we're the ones arming this whole problem, right?
Well, but let's understand one thing, that the guns were going into Mexico way before Fast and Furious occurred, whether we would have had Fast and Furious or not. I think that frankly, the Mexican government needs to stand up and stop blaming the United States for arming them. They need to address the issue of the cartels that they have in Mexico, and certainly we work very closely with foreign governments to stop the illegal flow of weapons in any direction. But I think that weapons were long available in Mexico before Fast and Furious. I think that the efforts that our government is doing to stop that flow is commendable, because our agents work very hard to stop that flow of weapons into Mexico.
Jay, do you think it's fair to say that the biggest threat to the United States could be from our southern border, whether it be from drug wars or from other terrorist organizations? Or, I mean, I was in Laos a year ago, and a Mexican drug dealer had been with someone that I was with doing a deal for drugs coming from Southeast Asia. So it's certainly more than Colombian cocaine now.
Sure it is. But I think, Aaron, let's put a couple things in perspective. Certainly, when you aggregate the amount of cartel deaths, again, 47,000 or 50,000, it's more than any loss of life anywhere else in the globe. So there in itself poses a significant threat. But let's also focus on some of the facts that have occurred over the last few years as well. When you take a look at the apprehensions along the Mexican border coming into the United States, last fiscal year was 340,000. That's down 53% from 2008, and 1/5 of what it was in 2000, when it reached its height of 1.6 million people coming across the border. So when you actually take a look at the fence being built, the deployment of additional agents and personnel and technology, there's a higher degree of control on the border today. That's not to say that 300,000 is an adequate number to apprehend. We need to do better. But I think the key to continue to make sure that we protect the country is to continue the strategy of not only just controlling our own border, but Mexico needs to do more on their side as well, controlling the borders coming into their country from Central and South America, where a lot of those drugs originate.
All right, thanks very much to both of you. This is going to be an issue we're going to be covering a lot more of on this show. And coming up, President Obama